Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today is going to be an Algorand video, and it's going to be an absolute banger of a video in case you missed it earlier. As I love to say, eat, sleep, Algorand, repeat. Guys, earlier today, John Allen Wood did an interview on Binance. The interview was absolutely fantastic. It's 1 hour long, and he goes into some details about Algorand, and he explains it to you like you're 5 years old. I actually learned something new on it. I'll make a different video on what I learned, but I wanted to just recap before I play you this video. In the last 2 weeks, I saw more public relations and I saw more marketing coming out of Algorand than I saw over the last year, and I am very pleasantly surprised. Last 10 days, Stacey Warden, the CEO of Algorand Foundation, did 3 interviews herself. This morning, John Allen Wood, the CMO, did an interview with Binance for the first half of the show, and then the second half of the show, Fred came on, he recapped it, answered some more questions, and I'll count that as 2 separate interviews. All in all, in the last 2 weeks, 5 different interviews on 4 different platforms. That's really amazing. And I truly believe that Algorand is just getting started. One of the biggest criticisms, especially coming from this person right here, and I was right about them, is that Algorand was lacking marketing, and even worse, it was lacking public relations. Going on this Binance podcast, this Binance AMA is exactly what we need. Stacey Warden going on interviews is exactly what we need. And I'll tell you something right now, it's not a coincidence. There's gonna be a lot more of this to come. If you don't have Algorand on your radar, you are definitely missing out. Now, keep in mind, when John is going to be speaking, you're going to see this gentleman from Binance like, what the F is going on here? Most people, the Binance bros, the Ethereum bros, the Polygon bros, the Avalanche bros, all these people have no clue how absolutely flawless, powerful, and just beautiful Algorand is. And I'm not trying to hype you up. Use an Algorand wallet. Use the Algorand blockchain. Use Algorand DeFi. It just works. Fast, cheap, energy efficient, and brilliantly built for purpose. Most people don't know about this. A lot of people are going to start knowing about this. And at the current price of Algorand being around 26, 27 cents an Algorand, it's an absolute travesty and pretty much a freebie, not financial advice. I will play you this video right now. Let me know what you guys think about it. It's an absolutely brilliant video. John Allen Wood literally knocked it out of the freaking park. He's a champion. He did a really, really good job. This is going to be the part 1 where John's speaking. Later, I'll post a Fred one.
Is the CTO, and the Algo team is definitely very well equipped in terms of like technical knowledge. So a lot of these questions might be a bit more technical, but I guess we're all in crypto, so this is definitely a necessity. And once again, for today's AMA, for all of the questions, you can start submitting questions in the chat now. We have Johan backstage who will help choose the questions. And if your questions get chosen, you will be eligible to receive $25 worth of Algorand Algo within 1 month. The rewards will be distributed within 1 month of this AMA. And again, if you see your question was chosen either from the your survey on Twitter or in the live chat, congrats to you. And please do not copy other people's questions. And at
Larry,
the end,
please don't ask me any hard questions now, Larry. Okay.
It's too late for that. It's already too late for that.
Oh no.
No, but I had a chat with John, and I think he has a magic ability. I was explaining these extremely hard concepts that normally are just gibberish to me, and that explaining it to like a 5-year-old, he's able to make me understand, which I guess all of you will be also able to understand. But yeah, let's without further. Oh, sorry. So the last part of today's AMA. So John will have a hard stop at the hour mark, and we will have Fred also from the Algorand Foundation to come in and help you guys recap today's concepts. And we will have a prize quiz at the end, so be sure to stay till the end to participate in the prize quiz. And this time we'll get share prize pool of $2,000 worth of Algo. So, all right, enough of the chit chat. Let's dive right into the questions. So first off, great question. Airdrop, ZZ 2023. I guess what makes Algo unique from other projects? And I guess if you could start with what is Algorand, and in terms of what is the Algo token.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. Thank you, Airdrop. So Algorand is a layer 1 blockchain, and it's programmable. So just like Ethereum, which was, I guess, the first blockchain to be programmable, on Algorand, it's not just a case of moving your tokens or spending the coins between the users and accounts within Algorand, but also you can put some logic on top of Algorand. It's kind of like Excel. You can fill out the cells and you can put in if statements, right? So if folks have used Microsoft Excel before, you can kind of program the cells and you can say, if this cell says this, then set this other cell to something else. So Algorand, just like Ethereum, has that capability. And this is really powerful because then you can use Algorand to send money conditionally. And so we're seeing tons of incredible applications that are built like DeFi. And this programmability enables all of that. Of course, I think the key differentiator for Algorand from other layer 1 blockchains, and by the way, there are many which are very capable, is probably the team. So Algorand's founder is Silvio Micali. And folks who are maybe not from an academic background or not who haven't worked in software or in cryptography probably may not have heard of him. But Silvio is like one of the Einsteins of modern cryptography. Silvio's pioneering work over the last few decades has given us things that are household names at this point. So he was one of the forefathers of zero knowledge proofs. That technology that's used on Zcash to hide transactions, we can thank Silvio for that. And Silvio has brought for Algorand a cryptographic primitive. And so when I say cryptographic primitive, what I'm really saying is like a Lego brick, right? When you're building things with Lego, you start building things up with these smaller blocks. And so Silvio has given us some of these cryptographic Lego bricks that we can build really sophisticated systems with. So Algorand's technology benefits from Silvio's inventions. So when you look at Algorand and other cool projects in the space, you want to look for things that have best-in-class engineering and best-in-class applied cryptography. But not just that, Algorand is separated on a couple of other vectors. Number one, it has a novel consensus algorithm called pure proof of stake, which we can get into later, Larry, and I'll give you some more details on it. But this pure proof of stake makes Algorand super fast. So in Algorand, consensus is always reached. There's never any disagreement over the blocks, so there's no forking. And this means that we have finality within 3 seconds. So if you send someone some funds, or you're playing poker with friends, you send them some algo, they get that algo within 3 seconds, and they're done. There's no need to wait around for confirmations. And finally, and we can explore this a little bit further later on, but at the heart of Algorand, or any platform, there's always a brain that executes the logic, right? There's something in Algorand that's able to run the smart contracts. And that brain, sometimes known as a CPU within standard computing, is called the AVM, or the Algorand virtual machine. Ethereum has a virtual machine too. It's called the EVM, or the Ethereum virtual machine. Algorand's virtual machine is quite simple. It's quite similar rather to Ethereum's, but has some differences. Because it came after Ethereum and it was able to look back on the mistakes that were made with the EVM on Ethereum, Algorand has tried to push forward the state of the art. So the AVM, or the Algorand virtual machine, is one which focuses much more on speed and efficiency, and also precision. So there are things that you can do a lot quicker on Algorand than maybe is possible on older chains like Ethereum.
Awesome. So yeah, I guess and with regards to this question, jumping back to like what makes Algo unique, you mentioned like first off, it has like programmability on it has built like a infrastructure that enables programmability on the blockchain, right? So I guess what a lot of people have heard of is smart contracts, where it enables sort of like you mentioned the if this then that logic,
Right.
and implements it on a blockchain instead of like on a centralized server. And very similar to a lot of the layer 1 blockchains that we have currently. Algorand implements this as well. And I guess in, a lot of users may also have heard of like POS.
Yeah.
And Algorand implements a version called PPOS, right?
Right.
So pure proof of stake. Could you touch a little bit on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and something I just call out, maybe I found this quite useful when explaining blockchain to folks. People are used to using Windows on their PCs. And Windows, people know, is an operating system. You run apps within Windows, right? Excel, Internet Explorer, whatever. On the Mac, people have Mac OS, and you run your apps on that. You run Safari or iMessage. And so people know these things as operating systems. I like to think of Algorand as a decentralized operating system. When you're running apps on your Mac, you're running them locally on your computer right in front of you. But when you run apps or smart contracts, as you say, Larry, on top of Algorand, you're doing so not just in one place, but on every computer in the Algorand network. And all those computers are watching each other's back using the consensus algorithm. So that means when you run apps, or we call them dApps, sometimes decentralized apps, or smart contracts on Algorand, by running decentralized, you can be sure that the execution of the logic inside those smart contracts was done correctly. So I think the simplest way to think of it is a decentralized operating system. And yeah, to touch on pure proof of stake. So at the heart of pure proof of stake, which is a variant of regular proof of stake, we have a cryptographic Lego brick called the VRF. VRF stands for verifiable random function. And this is some of the genius of Silvio Micali, who's our founder. Now, getting into how VRF works is, I guess, a little bit tricky without having a bit of background in it. But I like to think of it in simple terms as something where you can put in an input and you get out a signature, but also some randomness. Now, what's really important here is that, like, when you run the VRF, it's kind of like you're pulling, you're in Las Vegas and you pull on one of the slot machines and you pull the big bar down and the wheels spin around and some random values come up. And every time you run the VRF, it runs and you get these new random outputs. Although these outputs are random from this VRF, they're also deterministic. So we can look at all of the outputs. If you run it 10 times in a row and you have 10 random outputs, you can verify that they were all produced correctly. And we use this mathematical primitive, or this Lego brick, at the heart of the consensus algorithm. This randomness is used to select someone to produce a block within the overall network. So we have thousands of nodes running Algorand. And the way we produce new blocks in the blockchain is that we run this VRF, and randomly someone from all of the folks out there that are staking on the Algorand network, randomly but deterministically, someone is chosen to produce a block. You run the VRF again to reduce the crowd down and basically reduce the many proposals down to one. And then finally, we run the VRF a third time to finalize the block and add it to the blockchain. And all of this happens within about 3 seconds. So when you send a transaction, it can be included in a block within 3 seconds with 3 polls of this VRF. So this VRF thing is really the genius at the heart of pure proof of stake. And we call it pure because, unlike other proof of stake mechanisms, which are sometimes delegated or sometimes in a pool, with Algorand, it really is every individual contributing to the security of the network, and the VRF selecting one of those individuals to help produce the next block. Does that make sense?
No, yeah, that's super clear. And you mentioned, so could you elaborate a little bit more on, like, the differences between, like, the proof of stake, normal proof of stake and pure proof of stake? You mentioned, like, like, there's also a course on Binance Academy on Algo. So if you guys are interested, you can also pull that up while the AMA is going on. But no, there is in the article it mentioned that for pure proof of stake, the barrier to entry is lower, right? So in comparison with Ethereum, for example, you need 32 ETH in order to become a validator.
Right.
And that high barrier to entry, in terms of because 32 ETH times whatever the price, 1,600, 1,700 right now,
Yeah.
is a large sum of investment. I guess not a lot of people will be able to invest that amount.
Yeah.
And becoming a validator. But I guess one algo is something that a lot of people will be able to adopt and become a validator, but become a node, right? So if you could explain a bit on the nodes, the validators, and how they work together, and, like, differences between the normal proof of stake.
Absolutely. You know, a heartbreaking story from my own past is that in around 2015, Ethereum was trading around $6 or $7. It was kind of like the low after the DAO hack. And I lost, like, you know, just playing around with Ethereum on Satoshi Dice and stuff, I lost like probably about 50 ETH. But at the time, it was only worth a couple of $100, and I didn't really care, and I just got got on with things, and that was it. But now looking back, I could have been I could have been retired on an island somewhere. Okay, so pure proof of stake, as I mentioned, is where we use this randomness of the VRF to select someone from the audience of stakers. And as Larry says, you know, you don't have to have this kind of bar of like, you know, thousands of dollars worth of Algorand to participate. Anyone can participate with even a very, very small amount of algo, as in a couple of dollars worth. But of course, you will only be selected to produce a block and validate blocks based on how much stake you have. So if you have, you know, tens of thousands of algo, you're more likely to be selected to engage in consensus than, say, someone with 2 or 3 algo. And we do this, of course, because we need to make sure that the network is secured by those who have the greatest interest in it. So that's kind of the delta between regular proof of stake and pure proof of stake. I would say pure proof of stake as well is very energy efficient, and maybe we can come to that a little bit later. But there's also delegated proof of stake, which is used by Cardano, which is another very popular chain, and EOS and many other blockchains that are proof of stake out there. And the difference between pure proof of stake and these delegated proof of stake coins, or layer ones rather, is that with delegated proof of stake, you band together and you stake your coins to a pool. And so within Algorand, we don't really have this concept of pool production. Within Cardano, a bunch of folks will get together in a staking pool, and they will combine all of their Cardano together, and then that pool will collectively create blocks. On Algorand, this pure proof of stake mechanism allows us not to have those pools. So we try to think of it as having less centralization, because people are really standing on their own 2 feet and not banded together in pools as they would be in proof of work or in delegated proof of stake.
All right, awesome. So I think the takeaway here is, so pure proof of stake uses the VRF that you mentioned to choose from, to randomly choose from the sea of validators,
Right.
and to propose the next block, right?
Exactly.
And in terms of I think in the article there's also the concept of relay and participation nodes. Sure. Could you shed a bit of light on that?
Yeah. The 20-second thing there is they're both the same code base, so the same software runs both relays and participation. The difference is just how they're configured. When configured as participation, they're performing consensus. That's all they do. They create blocks, they validate blocks. When configured as a relay, they're like a super highway for blocks. So they transmit the blocks around. So once more, participation is really creating blocks and validating blocks, doing the consensus and processing transactions. And the relays are sending the data around. They're the information superhighways of the network, sharing the data between the consensus nodes, or the participation nodes, we call it.
Okay. All right. So let's move on to the next question, and congrats to Noah on the question on the pure proof of stake. All right. So next question is from Flop6. So what is the relationship between Algorand Foundation and Algorand Inc?
Cool. Yeah. Hi, Flop6. So in a nutshell, the Algorand Inc. Is based in the United States. They are a software house. Their job is to write the software for the protocol. So they are the coders that work on the Algorand protocol. And the Algorand Foundation is a non-US entity, so it's not based in the United States. And the Algorand Foundation's job is to safeguard the treasury, to invest in the ecosystem, to foster adoption, to do AMAs like this, to educate folks, and to enhance the user experience of Algorand users.
So, okay, Algorand Foundation is more on like ecosystem development. I guess also a lot of the foundations, 2 layer ones is grants, hackathons, hosting grants, hackathons, and really just developing the whole Algorand ecosystem. Whereas the Algorand Inc. is a software company based in US, pushing forward the development.
And we still work with these folks. We still engage in technical debates and share specifications for the code. And I mean, it's not like they're not completely working on their own in isolation. We talk, of course, but yeah, fundamentally they're the software engineers, and we are working on boosting the ecosystem.
Awesome. All right. So the question from Fujiro asks, what are the Algorand strength compared to their competitors or
Sure.
other layer ones, I guess?
Yeah, sure, Fujiro. Thanks for the question. So I would say, and this is kind of a roundabout way of saying it, but I'll give some examples, that Algorand is fit for purpose. And so what I mean is I've built on many other blockchains, and I found sometimes there was limiting factors that gave a user experience for those running apps on the blockchains or dApps or smart contracts that wasn't that great. And I find that Algorand checks enough of the boxes that the user experience when you're using a dApp, whether that's to play a game or whether that's something more serious like global remittance, when you're using these dApps in Algorand, you're going to have an experience that's really good. And so what are the characteristics of Algorand that really create that strength? It's scalable. And what I mean by that is it operates at the same speed, whether we're seeing 20 transactions a second or whether we're seeing 7,000 transactions a second. The same 3-second finality is there. A transaction is sent and confirmed every time within that 3 seconds, whether or not the network is at capacity or it's only a trickle. It's resilient. And what I mean by that is Algorand has not had any downtime since it began 3 years ago. Now, I want to be clear. That doesn't mean we'll never see any downtime. It doesn't mean it's perfect. I'm not saying the code is perfect. Code is imperfect by definition, I think, actually, as a software engineer. But as of now, it's been built in a way that the architecture and the design has proven so far, touch wood, to be resilient. And so that's important because you want the blockchain to be there when you want to use it, right? It's no good if you go to use this thing and it's down for 4 hours. And it's secure. And I've talked about that briefly when I talked on pure proof of stake. That fundamental consensus mechanism ensures the security of the network. And so we strongly believe that pure proof of stake is a highly secure mechanism with which to safeguard users' funds. I would say as well, though, there's more than just that. Let me just touch on when you're building enterprise-grade apps for users. So let's say you're building a big DEX. It's not just something that's a pet project, but something that's going to be used by tens of thousands of users. You want that experience for the end user to be quick, fun, and cheap. And so one of the novel factors with Algorand, so Algorand is a blockchain, right? It's not a DAG, it's a blockchain like other blockchains. So you have a block and it's linked to the next block cryptographically and it's linked to the next block cryptographically. And so one of the things though you see in other chains, let's say Ethereum, is this idea of a fork height battle or a block height battle, as you sometimes termed. And what this is a block is produced, another block is produced, things are good, and blocks are being created, and all of a sudden there's a split in consensus. This is normal, by the way, it happens from time to time. And so you have, rather than having a single blockchain, you have this like two-headed snake. Now, this doesn't last very long. After about 5 or 6 blocks, one of the chains will die away, and then everyone will switch to the longest chain. This happens in Bitcoin, Ethereum, Cardano, etc. It's not a big deal. The software is built on to handle this. But you see, if you're in the one of the chains that dies away, your transaction is effectively reverted. So let's say you sent your friend $100, and if you were unfortunate enough to be on one of these short forks that dies away, your $100 is just returned to you. Now the problem is that's okay for you because you notice it in your personal wallet and you just send it again. But if you're building an enterprise-grade application for thousands of users, it gets really messy. So I can tell you, when I was building on Ethereum, a lot of the time I spent designing middleware or software that would help monitor for these forks and replay transactions if necessary. And this is really time-consuming. On Algorand, consensus is always reached on 100% of the time. So we never have these short forks. So we say there's no forks on Algorand. And so with this, it ensures that you don't have to worry about these replays. And this greatly simplifies when you're building enterprise-grade applications for thousands of users. So I would say that's a strength. And then finally, I just want to touch on our DevRel guys. We have a team of DevRel, developer relation engineers. And so if you want to build on Algorand, we're going to give you a concierge or white glove level service. And what that means is if you have any idea and you're interested in building, whether you're a small one-person shop or whether you're an enterprise-grade company with hundreds of engineers, we have free white glove service. You can come to us, we'll help you design, audit, implement, and make sure that you get to mainnet to bring your idea to the public. So that's there for everyone. And I think these are the things that separate us from, I think, the other chains that are out there at the moment.
Awesome. So yeah, I guess this this is one of the major highlights of Algorand. First off, you mentioned in terms of the vision, it's a fit for purpose blockchain, right? And then in terms of like the infrastructure, there's no forks where in other consensus algorithms there are short forks, and then it goes back to the longest chain. But with how Algorand is designed, there won't be these kind of cases. So essentially, I think from a software developer point of view, this design can really minimize the friction of onboarding new developers.
Exactly.
And then you lastly mentioned, like, I guess for blockchain to succeed, definitely the developer relationships is you have to have developers to have good apps, and then in order to get users, right? So
Right.
coming from a developer relationship perspective, this is one of the strongest advantages that Algorand possesses. And
Cool.
yeah, I think also building on this question and the last question, one of our live audiences has asked, what is AVM and smart contract? So yeah, I guess they did a little bit of homework as well. So we mentioned already PPOS, the pure proof of stake. And I guess here AVM is I'm referring to the Algorand virtual machine. So if you could first give a brief introduction on what virtual machine is for users that aren't, computer science background.
Sure.
And I guess a lot of people have heard of EVM, the Ethereum virtual machine, and then what AVM is.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. And was it Jelu? Thank you for the question, Jelu. Okay, so okay, where do I start on this? So I mentioned earlier that Algorand and other blockchains like Ethereum that support smart contracts are really like distributed or decentralized operating systems. The apps you run on your MacBook are called apps. The apps you run on your iPhone are called apps. And the apps you run on Algorand are called dApps, or decentralized apps. So a smart contract is just another way of saying an app for Algorand. The AVM is the Algorand virtual machine. And so folks will know that computers have CPUs. So they have a brain. Every computer has a chip inside it, like Intel chips or AMD chips or Apple Silicon. These are common processors that are inside your computer, and their job is to do the calculations, right? Whether it's rendering video games or adding up numbers. And so the Algorand virtual machine, just like the Ethereum virtual machine, is really the brain or the processor of the Algorand platform. And so whenever you write a dApp or a smart contract, you compile that code into an app that's ready to run on Algorand. You upload it to the blockchain. It's the AVM that will take that code that you've written and run it. So the AVM is the brain of the Algorand platform, and it's quite similar to the EVM in the sense that they both do the same thing. They run code. The difference between the EVM and the AVM is that inside that brain, it's wired a little differently. And so the EVM is excellent and it can do a hell of a lot of things. The AVM is excellent and can do the same things, but it tries to do them faster and with more precision. And when I say more precision, what I mean is when you're dealing with numbers or integers within the AVM, and this is more of a software engineering thing, the Algorand virtual machine can handle large numbers with ease. And this means that you can kind of do things quicker and you can do them more accurately within the AVM. Hope that makes sense.
Okay, yeah, no, I think the comparison with the AVM and EVM is great, and like you mentioned that it's the virtual machine is sort of like the brain, uh, the brains of the computer, right? Helping running the programs, and so all right. So next question is from Tamina 1350. So what okay, so what makes Algorand a green blockchain? So I guess they already have some background on this, but
Cool, yeah.
yeah.
Thanks, Tamina. Yeah, so I mean, look, Algorand runs on about 80 kilowatts of instantaneous energy. And for folks out there who are not electrical engineers, if you're using a shower at home, you're using about 10 kilowatts, okay? And Algorand, that's a power shower, an electric power shower. If you're boiling a kettle, you might be using 4 kilowatts. Algorand, the entire network, is running on 80 kilowatts. And so this is a network that's processed billions of transactions and processes millions of dollars a day in terms of volume, tens of millions mostly. And so for 80 kilowatts, which is basically like charging a Tesla or charging a standard electric vehicle, the amount of juice that your electric car uses when it's plugged in, that's about 80 kilowatts if you're plugged in on the sidewalk. And so I think that that's pretty green, right? That's pretty efficient. And so it's so green and efficient that we can take all of the carbon that Algorand produces by running these computers over the course of a year. And every year we go out to the market and we buy carbon credits and we execute, usually on chain using something like climate trade. We execute a trade where we purchase the carbon to ensure that we are carbon offset. And in most cases, carbon not only neutral, but carbon negative. So we have actually taken carbon out of the atmosphere for the execution of Algorand. So Algorand, its pure proof of stake mechanism is so power efficient that the computers that are hosting the Algorand network only use about as much power as a charging electric vehicle. And look, if you take other proof of stake networks, they are somewhere a little bit more energy usage than us, not an order of magnitude more. But of course, if you start then moving to proof of work, which is a different consensus algorithm that uses computation to secure the network, you then see that order of magnitude jump in terms of power consumption. So Algorand really is one of the greenest blockchains out there.
Yeah, so like you mentioned, proof of work, in order to reach consensus, miners have to consume a lot of computation, right? So that's why they need a lot of sort of like mining computers, and which consumes a lot of energy. And for proof of stake blockchains, and with the Ethereum merge last year, a lot of these proof of stake blockchains have moved to a really low energy consumption. And in addition to that, Algorand also has committed to buying carbon credits off the market, so that in general, in some, the blockchain itself is carbon negative. And yeah, so great question from Tamina. So I think we have a developer also in the audience. So Right in Coffee asks, when is AlgoKit going to be released? I guess first off, what is AlgoKit?
Yeah.
And then you can maybe let us know more about the timelines.
Sure, Right in Coffee, thanks for the question. So, one of the most fundamental things that I think Algorand needs to work on is the developer experience. And so what do I mean by that? When you're developing an Android app or an iPhone app on a modern operating system, on a modern laptop, you've got a great user experience. It's file, new project, you get all the tools in one place that you need to realize your idea, your game, your app, okay? And when you're building and writing that code, it's easy to test, it's easy to deploy into an app and test on your phone, and the overall experience is fun. Even most times quite visual, so you can test in a visual simulator and run your app right there in a virtual Android phone on your computer. If we want to see Algorand, well, this is my vision, but if we want to see Algorand grow into an enormous chain with trillions of dollars of value, we have to make the experience of building apps or smart contracts on Algorand easy peasy. So much so that not even just for professional developers, but we have to make it easy enough that even a young person who's 14, 15 years old, who's a beginner in computers, can take a stab at doing this and play with it. And so AlgoKit is that. AlgoKit is software that makes it fun and easy to build on Algorand. AlgoKit's first release is next month. So at the end of March next month, we're going to have AlgoKit version 1.0. And that's going to give developers the kind of tools that they're used to when they're doing modern development. So things like visual debugging, simulators locally for their code, command line tools that they can build, test, and deploy in one command. And indeed, it totally changes the paradigm when you're developing. So rather than writing code in a very old style, line by line, you're going to write it in a much more kind of focused way where you concentrate on the contract and not all the boilerplate and stuff around. So AlgoKit version 1.0 is going to be a revolution in terms of how you build apps for Algorand. It's going to make it super easy. AlgoKit version 2 is going to be at the end of 2023, early 2024. We already have some very exciting things that we're going to bring for V2. So V1 is going to be great. I don't want to sabotage V1 by talking too much about V2, but I think V1 is going to make it just such a nice thing, such a nice experience when you're building. And also just to mention to folks, with these tools, even when they're easy, people still need to know how to use them. And so we're going to be releasing a series of short videos because people don't like to sit down anymore for 2 hours, right? They want to watch 5-minute videos and learn a thing or two. So we're going to release 30 videos, which are 5 to 10 minutes long. That's going to teach you how to use AlgoKit in a fun and simple way. And you can watch them while you're sitting on the sofa in the evening time.
Yeah, I think a lot of the themes on the advantages of Algorand has really revolved around how it is very developer friendly, right? And really, I think again, worth mentioning is that for a blockchain to succeed, I guess really it's adoption from users, where and good dApps. And
Totally.
so John already mentioned that in addition to the infrastructure, to the sort of like the superior infrastructure in terms of like no fork management and white gov developer relationships. Now there's also AlgoKit, which is a very easy or developer friendly way for users to get into the Algorand ecosystem. And I guess I'm not sure if this is a good comparison, but I guess the Apple ecosystem with Swift, where Swift is a very easy language to learn and very playful language. And I also saw I guess an interview or speech on YouTube with you explaining a bit more on these developer kits. So for those that are interested, or for coffee, if you're interested, I guess you can go there
Sure.
to check on that video as well.
Yeah, that's exactly it, though. I think with Swift, Apple have opened up development to everyone. You don't have to be a computer nerd anymore. You can be just someone who just wants to sit down for half an hour and try. And so that's where we need to get. And it's also where I'm pushing to take development of the smart contracts or the dApps to be in a place where we use traditional languages. So people want to use Python. They don't want to use some new language that they have to learn. And that's where we need to get to.
Awesome. Thanks, John. So next question from Adani is, how serious does Algorand take security? And have you done, or has Algorand has done any security audits?
Sure. So, from my time working on Cardano as an example, because I worked there on the protocol rather than on the ecosystem, I was involved directly on the protocol with Cardano. I can tell you, these serious, credible Layer 1 projects take security extremely serious. When we're releasing software on Algorand, and when I was releasing software over Cardano, we have to make sure that the software is as close to perfect as possible. Now, perfection in software is a pipe dream. It's not possible. There's always going to be bugs, especially in software that's as sophisticated as these applications that we're talking about. But ultimately, this is people's livelihoods. It's people's money. And in some cases, people shouldn't have, they should try to avoid having too much money in these things if they can't afford it. But sometimes this can be a person's entire life savings, as an example. So we have to make sure that we take that responsibility really, really seriously. And so I can tell you at Algorand, just as I did at Cardano, we take that gargantuan responsibility really seriously. So yes, we do audits on many, many different things. We're going to have MetaMask support coming up soon. So that is the ability for you to use MetaMask, the Ethereum wallet that many of you will know, of course, and use that to hold, spend, and interact with dApps on Algorand. So there's going to be Algorand support in MetaMask. For that product, we had to write that code to integrate with MetaMask, and it's undergoing audit right now. So we care deeply that if we're releasing something that it's going to hold users' funds, that it's going to be audited. In terms of the node itself, though, the core software that runs the Algorand participation and relay nodes, it's not possible to audit the entire code base every time we make a release. Audits are really, really expensive, especially for very sophisticated software. And they also take a ton of time. And so the development of cryptocurrencies would be really, really slow if we had an audit every single time we release something. So in lieu of that, because of course it's just prohibitively expensive and prohibitively time consuming, we use a slew of techniques to make sure the quality of the software is good. So we use things like formal methods. This is mathematical proofs of the correctness of the software. And this takes time too, but you can actually prove that the software is correct using mathematics. We have a very, very elaborate test suite. So every release of Algorand will go through a battery of tests where it gets hailed with various bullets, testing every single aspect of it. And we add to these tests every single time we add a new feature. by running these tests, we can very quickly assess whether or not the changes we've made have broken anything that was working correctly before. And then finally, we run the software through a bunch of benchmarks. And this tests the performance of it and really kind of puts it through its paces. Very much like putting it on a treadmill and seeing how it performs. And if you combine all of these things together, the test suite, the QA, the quality assurance, the benchmarks, the formal methods, and that dedication to quality, we have a pretty bulletproof system so far. But of course, as I've said before, bugs are there. Bugs are in every piece of software, and we try our best to make sure we don't release any serious ones.
All right. So next question is from Snake. Yes, 97097 is, what are the cryptographic techniques used by Algorand to ensure that transactions are transparent and tamper-proof, and how do they contribute to overall security?
Sure, absolutely. So Snake Eyes, thanks for the question. So my background is actually in applied cryptography as well. And so this is a question that I'm quite personally interested in, but I'll keep it as quick as possible because obviously it's a rabbit hole. So in terms of the public-private keys, people will know that cryptocurrencies like Algorand use public key cryptography. So you have a public key and a private key. Your private key is how you spend algo and how you create transactions, and your public key is actually your receive address. And so within this public-private key pair stuff, there's many different ways to do it. And so we use a scheme called ED 25519. And this is a state-of-the-art elliptic curve cryptography scheme. It's a signature algorithm that allows a person to generate a private key easily and issue transactions with that private key. This Edwards 25519 elliptic curve is state-of-the-art. And it's used by Monero, it's used by Cardano, and many other chains. We also, in terms of like keeping the transactions, the veracity of the blocks, making sure that the blockchain has a chain. The chain we use between the blocks for the blockchain is a hashing algorithm we use called SHA-2. So we fingerprint a block and we inject that fingerprint or that hash digest into the next block, so that each block is mathematically linked. So I would say that they're the two primitives. We also have some post-quantum security that we've introduced using Falcon, which is a lattice-based post-quantum signature scheme. But I think that's probably a bit too much to talk about for now. But yeah, some state-of-the-art crypto in there.
Yeah, I think the only takeaway I can conclude there is that it's state-of-the-art state-of-the-art technology. But no, I think the we could go into a whole crash course on what you've just mentioned. Sure. Let me do my best and try not to sabotage what you just said. But generally, there are two technologies here: SHA-2, SHA-2, and ED 25519. So I guess SHA-2 is more common. Some of you even not in the computer science. This is a very common cryptography technology, right? So in terms of hashing, where blocks, like you mentioned, and a great visual example there, where hashing, where how blocks link together, they use that SHA-2 function. And then in terms of the ED 25519, that is the proprietary cryptography technology that Algorand implements. It's the signing. It's for signing the transactions. And you mentioned something called the elliptic curve. So yeah, could you give some context or background on what an elliptic curve is? I guess this is also very common in blockchains as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So it doesn't matter what you're using: Bitcoin, Ethereum, Cardano, Monero, Algorand, Near, you name it, Solana. They all use elliptic curve cryptography. It's a common technology across all blockchains, pretty much. And it's just a way to do public-private keys. So with a public key, you want to be able to verify signatures with the private key. And with the private key, you want to be able to create signatures that can be verified with the public key. And so you could do that using RSA. People might have heard of RSA. They used to use it in banks quite a lot. But elliptic curves are just another way to do this using two-dimensional curved geometries over finite fields. It's quite a complicated thing to explain, really, but it's basically just some mathematics that we can use to build on these public-private key pairs.
Got it. Yeah, just Google it if you if you don't understand it.
Yeah, don't read the Wikipedia article. It took me about 5 years to understand it. So
No, we'll have to invite you back to launch a whole crash course on cryptography. But no, a great I guess a great follow-up question here, and thanks for the question. I'll go update. You mentioned the last part was the Falcon the Falcon lattice. So here you mentioned something about quantum computing. I mean quantum proofs, or so.
yeah,
The question is, in what ways are quantum proofs superior to zero knowledge proofs, and how can other blockchains adopt quantum proofs to improve their security?
sure. So these are two different things. Zero knowledge and quantum technologies are two different things. So I'll just try to give a very short 1 minute answer on both. Zero knowledge proofs is the idea that you can prove to someone that you know something without revealing what it is. And a very simple example of this is this. Imagine we have two people and they're standing outside of a tunnel. And the tunnel wraps around like this, like a big N shape. If there's a gate in the tunnel that has a PIN code inside, and you need to enter the PIN code to go through the metal gate to get back out. So if you go in one side of the tunnel, you get to the gate. If you don't know the code, it's locked. And you verify that it's locked together. So if this gentleman who's with me, for example, wants to prove to me with zero knowledge that he knows the code to that gate, he can do one thing. We can both walk into the tunnel. We can check the gate is locked. I can leave the tunnel and I can stand there looking at both the entrance and the exit. I know he went into the entrance, and if he comes out the exit, I know he must have known the code to the gate, because there was no way for him to pass the gate and come back out the exit. And that's a simple visual example of a zero knowledge proof. That person would have showed me or proven to me that he knew the code to the gate without actually telling me the code. That's zero knowledge. I don't get the code, but he did prove it to me. Zero knowledge proofs can be used in blockchains for some really groovy things. They tend to be used for security and for succinctness. So this is where you can say, rather than give me a lot of data, you can just give me a tiny bit of data and a proof that shows that it represents some larger set. Or the most common use case for zero knowledge proofs that I've seen is privacy. And so on blockchains like Zcash and Monero and others, they use zero knowledge proofs in order to provide a privacy where a person can't see who you're spending the coins to, nor how much is being spent, but they can validate that the transactions being created, although they can't see too much information about them, are valid. And so this is a really great technology. So that's ZKP, zero knowledge. Moving now to quantum. Most computers that we use, or all computers that we use, I should say, from your iPhone to your Windows desktop, are what are called classical computers. They have CPUs inside, like I described earlier on, similar to the AVM. They run normal applications. Well, there's a theorized computer called a quantum computer. And you can think of this in some government basement in the NSA somewhere, a shiny computer from the future with twinkling lights with a purple glow maybe. And this computer harnesses the power of quantum mechanics, in particular quantum superposition, in order to basically do many things at once in a very parallelized way. This computer is a theoretical possibility. We haven't seen any real ones yet, but it's theorized that because we're making a lot of progress technologically, both Google, IBM, and other major companies are coming out with these quantum computers that are getting better and better and better. They're still nowhere near the standard that's needed to just shred up cryptography, but they're getting closer. And so this is like the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse for modern cryptography. We have to move to technologies that are able to withstand an attack from one of these shiny quantum computers. And so at Algorand, we have started that journey. There are 3 different ways you need to be quantum secure. So you're secure against this supercomputer from the future. One is in the history of the chain, making sure people can't arbitrarily go back and use this special computer to change transactions that were previously done. The second is in your account. You want to make sure that your account balance can't be spent. So if I have 100 Bitcoin, a quantum computer could theoretically take that from me. You need to secure your account from being against quantum attacks. And that means employing a quantum secure signature scheme. And finally, the consensus algorithm, whether it's the VRF used in pure proof of stake or the SHA-2 proof of work used in Bitcoin, you need to make sure that your consensus algorithm is also quantum secure. So these are 3 things we need to do, and there's no blockchain out there so far that I'm aware of that's done any of them. except for Algorand. We've taken down the first leg of this journey. We've employed a thing called state proofs, which themselves in turn use a post-quantum or a quantum-safe signature scheme called Falcon. This is one that was developed by scientific minds around the world. It's been validated by the US government and others for use. And it uses a mathematical technique called n-dimensional lattices. And these are like clouds of points in space. But ultimately, these lattice-based signatures are safe against this twinkly quantum computer. And so we have them on Algorand protecting the history of the chain, but we still need to add them to the signatures to protect the accounts and add them to the consensus to protect the future of the chain. And so I hope that makes sense. That's ZKPs and quantum in maybe a little bit longer than 2 minutes. Sorry.
Yeah, so this is going to be a challenge for me, but let me try to unpack that a little bit. I guess that's another series of crash course. But thanks so much for. I know. I think first off for ZKPs, for zero knowledge proofs, you gave a very visual example, right? But the takeaway there is really just proving something to you without giving giving you as less information as possible, but proving that something is true, or proving that proving something to you without giving you too much information.
Right.
And I think the tunnel is a pretty classic example, which I guess for the viewers, if you're interested, you can Google that up. And ZKP is very, very popular in the crypto space. So that's definitely something that you would want to learn about with your journey going forward in crypto. And then for quantum proofs, I guess for current cryptology, the essence is that you just make something that's so complicated that it takes normal computers forever to be able to solve. But there's definitely some like a time where if given enough time, they can solve that problem.
Absolutely.
Or they can decrypt a certain problem. But with just the computation power, it will take forever. However, for like you mentioned, there are I love that I love that visualization, the shiny computer under in the NSA's basements, which has superior computing power, which can shatter the current cryptography algorithms, or
Exactly.
so. The Algorand is already planning ahead in this sense, and you mentioned like in 3 ways in terms of a blockchain, how to protect against if the emergence of a quantum computer, how to protect against an attack, a theoretical attack from a quantum computer. And this is where quantum proofs come in. So yeah, I guess you mentioned 3 legs. The first off is the chain itself. I have a quick question here. So in terms of like choosing that they cannot making sure that they cannot change the past records, is this similar to what like the longest chain method does in terms of like a lot of these consensus mechanisms, they go to like choosing the longest chain available. But you also mentioned like there's no forks in Algorand, but I'm not sure if that's relevant to this. If you could.
Yeah, sure. So there's various algorithms that a quantum computer can use to be effective. And so for symmetric primitives, like SHA-2 and AES and other encryption technologies, we can use an algorithm called Grover's algorithm on a quantum computer. And this will be able to break, rather I should say, forge fraudulent links between blocks. So if someone has one of these quantum computers, they can potentially swap out transactions in a really old block, recreate, break SHA-2 in a way that we can, recreate the bond and kind of forge a fake transaction so that people can double spend and mess around with the history of the chain. By taking the entire history of the chain and pushing it through a signature using a post-quantum scheme like Falcon, we can effectively put a stamp on all of the things that have been done up to date. So maybe we did this, a few months back, but let's say all of from the blockchain from block 1 all the way to like a couple of months ago, we basically stamped that with Falcon, and now it's signed in a way that if anyone changes it, they'll also have to change the Falcon signature on it, or people won't trust it. And they can't change the Falcon signature on it because they'd have to break Falcon, which is post-quantum secure. So even if a quantum computer does break our traditional cryptography, securing the links between the blocks, they won't be able to override that stamp that we put on it with Falcon. And then the other two pieces, as you mentioned, are the accounts and then the future or the consensus mechanism. Does that make sense?
All right. Yeah. Thanks for that. So, yeah, quantum proofs. I saw a question also from the chat. Brute, I guess Brute, B route. Could you explain what state proof is in bridges, in the context of bridges? But generally, I think quantum proof is the same as state proofs.
Yep. So state proofs use this quantum technology. So B-Route, thanks for the question. State proofs they do three really cool things. Number one, state proofs are the issuance of quantum signatures on the chain. So we use this post-quantum technology Falcon in state proofs. So state proofs are the technology that are securing, from a quantum point of view, the history of the chain. That's number one. Number two, state proofs allow us to quickly catch up the chain. So rather than validate every block from the very beginning, which is very computationally expensive, one can use state proofs to just jump straight away to the top block on the chain, or within a couple of hundred blocks from the top of the chain, and trust the state proof that the current if you like, state of the chain is valid. So you don't have to go get all the blocks, validate them all. Instead, you can just jump straight to the top of the queue and check the state proof in a second or two, and then straight away okay, I'm good from here. I don't have to go back and do that homework. And that allows people to build nodes that can catch up really fast, that they don't have to sync from the beginning. Super good. And then finally, to answer the question, state proofs are primarily a bridging technology. So let's talk about bridges. Blockchains are like islands, and so they don't naturally talk to each other, despite the fact that they're running on computers that are connected to the internet. These applications don't talk to each other the same way, I guess, your browser doesn't naturally talk to your Maps app. Okay, you got to copy paste the data between them. And so to build a bridge between blockchains, you have to do the following two things. Number one, you got to create an endpoint and a receive point. So you got to have a smart contract or a dApp on one chain and a smart contract or a dApp on the other chain, where you lock funds on one side and release them on the other. And then when you want to go back the other way, when you want to bridge back, you lock funds on one side and you release them on the other. Okay, so that's one part of an architecture for a blockchain bridge. The second piece, though, is in the middle. How do you validate that this blockchain locked the coins and this blockchain is okay to release? And vice versa, when this blockchain finally locks to go back, how do you validate that it's okay now to release? You'd have to communicate the state of both blockchains to each other. You'd have to prove to each blockchain that this guy has locked, you can release. This guy has locked, now you can release. And so that's what state proofs do. They succinctly prove the state of the Algorand blockchain to anyone who's out there. So you can, without having a guardian layer or a layer of validators, most bridges have this like human element where they have 10, 15, 20, 30 people who are validators for bridges like Wormhole. And they'll watch transactions on both sides, on both chains, and they will attest to the veracity or the correctness of that. So when a bridge needs to happen, they lock the tokens, they ask the validators, is it good? And then if those humans say yes, we release the coins and the bridge is done. That's okay, but we're still trusting humans. State proofs lets us trust the math instead. And so state proofs are a mathematically secure way to validate the state on Algorand with a tiny piece of data. The state on Algorand, of course, is gigabytes and gigabytes of data, but state proofs are only about 3 or 4 megabytes. They're tiny. And so they use a very powerful technique. It's basically a threshold multi-signature reveal that's been signed by a post-quantum fast Fourier lattice-based signature. So it's very complicated technology, but at its essence, what does it do? It can take all of Algorand, run it through a state proof, and give you a tiny piece of data that can prove to Ethereum, Binance Smart Chain, Cardano, whoever. You can prove to any blockchain out there that, hey, the state of Algorand has these coins locked. It's okay to bridge them across. So that's state proofs in a nutshell. I'm happy to do a deep dive on it at some point. It's pretty cool stuff.